magnificent men in their flying machine. They go up to the top, they go down, there. Oh, rightfully keen, those magnificent men in their flying machine. Sure, they really don't care. Newton will think he has made a mistake to see those young men.
We just flew from one farmer's field to another. We were at home. We had our own field on our hay fields right at home. We'd come in and land and run up and down the field right at our own home. Most people out in the backwoods. There was no Department of Commerce at that time, or FAA or CAA as the early ones were. So you just went out and fly, and if you felt that it was feasible to fly that day, you flew. If it was too windy, you have your own judgment whether you went flying or not. And it's gusty, you didn't want to wreck your airplane because you had a lot of time spent in fixing it up and keeping it going.
What you're seeing here today are some of the efforts that was put on by the local group of people in Waukesha that got together and formed the Waukesha Aviation Club to finally develop an airport whereby they could fly their home-built airplanes and their gliders and so forth. They usually meted once a month and had speakers from out through the country to come to talk to them how to promote aviation and form an aviation club. The club at the present time did get the county board to establish an airport.
Well, we did everything that was daring. In other words, that we went by the hard way.
Flying squirrels in the woods, and we see them how they stretch out and fly. We even put gunny bags on top, jumped off the hay mows in the main house, see if we could fly like she could fly.
We heard flying was going to be the coming thing, and we wanted to be part of it. This was it. And we didn't want farming. We mechanical. We wanted motorcycles. We had motorcycles.
Exciting sports and all. The early air shows in 1930, we had put on, we only charged $1 a seat to come in to see the show. And we had quite a few of them there doing acrobatics and things like that. There's a lot of people come out to watch it.
They're watching right now, watching Bob Huggins do smoke riding, and that was one of his occupations at that time. This is the PA announcer telling all about. This is a horse race start of OX5 race. In those days, you could start all in a bunch, and who got up there first and who got back on the ground and was the winner.
Now we had the pants race. The idea was to get a number of planes with a pilot and a passenger in each one, and then they'd take off and go around and land, and then the passenger had to take his trousers off and see who could get back on and get the pants on quick. This fella here, somebody tied him in a knot, so he had to take and untie him to get back in the airplane. I don't think he won the race because he had to spend too much time taking his pants. So
this is one of the parts of the air show that was put on. It was a kind of comedy act. That's Dean in the Waukesha 10 who was going to go up and bomb this Model T, which is not supposed to be out on the field. Now he is practicing up here to pick up the handkerchief. That's the first miss, but here's the second round. This time it don't look that easy, but there he is. He picked up the handkerchief. That was Dean in the Waukesha.
Dean is one of the finest pilots that I think I've ever met in my life. And the proof of it is that he had an engine actually fall out of an airplane, and he got the airplane down intact with the student in it. That takes some real skill. A propeller had lost a blade, and the unbalanced condition was such that it just tore the engine right out of the motor mount. And with the engine gone, naturally the center of gravity shifts way to the rear of the aircraft. And the student wanted to bail out, but Dean says, no, you stay in there. We're going to need all the weight we can get. So by careful manipulation and timing, Dean managed to get the airplane down intact, and the engine landed, of all places, the engine landed in a cemetery. And Dean landed in a field just adjacent to the cemetery.
this is a plane Earl O'Meara used to have in Waukesha on the Saudi Wiskowitz. They just flying around and had the misfortune the engine quit and landed in the orchard and kind of ruined the airplane that time. That's a number of years ago. Nobody was hurt in this one, a small airplane. That's something what happens at the airport in the wintertime, kind of spoils the flying. This was a meet we had to carry passengers to promote aviation. That's Russell Wilson there and Jack Lehman, and that's Russell shoots, he's flying the Swallow. And this happens to be an airplane that caught fire in the air. Could do a malfunction of a carburetor, caught fire in the air, and it was ended up as a fatal accident at the time.
Here we should take and put it on the Rocco and try it out someday.
Yeah. Well, while we wait, I'll put this over there.
Good.
Now, let's take this out and see if it's good as it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think it should be well done. I don't know how well it's working.
We'll put it in place there, and so we can hold it, turn it, see how it operates. This is
We had trouble, yeah. This wouldn't start when I brought it home from Hammondsport.
that's the magneto.
It don't look like there's anything wrong with
That
that.
looks all right there.
Right? Well, it looks like it's in good shape. And I don't know, when we put it on, push it another one, if we contemplate building another one. The fabric is sewed to the wings. Each rib has to be sewed. And it takes quite a technique to sew that all on it. Then it
Why don't you just clean the outside edge up like that's all it needed, not that deep when you move it.
This is up at Al Kelce's. Channel 6 came out one day and wanted to get a flight with my daughter on the wing, but here's the Dean there giving a Cusher a flight check. This is a normal procedure on an OX5 is to drain all of the sediment bowls, which is on the carburetor, to get all the dirt and water out of it so they don't have any failure. This is where we put gasoline into the tank up there, and we're using a chamois skin here. Water will not go through a chamois, so it makes a good preventive thing from getting water in the carburetor. This is the overhead, what we call the overhead on the OX5, and each part of those has to be oiled up. Each pub is a couple hours of flying. That's the control wheel which controls that's the aileron that Dean there is showing the function of it. Now we're putting on the coal bucket and binders, what they say in those days, and making a flight. You have to have something to keep the noise out of your ears. The propeller is started by giving us, it has a self-starter. You do the starter yourself. You head it down the runway, and most generally directly into the wind. The airplane takes off in about 150 feet. If the wind's blowing a little harder, that shortens up the takeoff. The airplane climbs at about 400, 500 feet a minute, and it's capable of carrying additional passengers. In those days, you got $25 just to make a flight.
Well, Dale says in calm air that it'll fly hands off. But most of the time when Dale flew it for air shows was not during calm air periods. This was in violation as to what Curtis had actually recommended for flying. He says, Curtis says that the aircraft should not be flown in the times when the air is turbulent. He said that he flew his airplanes only during the early morning periods when the mosquitoes were out, and in the evening when the mosquitoes were out again.
When you first go up there to fly with someone, that airplane is absolutely separate from you. But as you fly, and pretty soon the wings become part of you. The airplane becomes part of you. You're like a bird. You've come to the feeling of sense. You do everything subconsciously. You make banks, you speed, turn. It's just like a bird. And so in other words, I say the airplane becomes part of you. And when you go up there first, it's just a piece of machinery, mechanical. It's separate from you. And you can tell that yourself when you fly. You subconsciously fly the airplane. You just look at where you're going, and you see there's nobody around there. You make turns, you make this. It's all done subconsciously.
That's taking a ride in a Waco biplane. Those things were used during to go out barnstorming with. Everybody wanted to ride it. It's like riding a convertible. It's nothing like being free in the air and doing loops. Passengers just would get in line and go right back in again when we were barnstorming out around the country. They just something about flying in an open airplane.
Well, a loop is a simple maneuver if you really, after you do it a few times, you don't worry about get the thing over with, because in a loop, they had those days was what they call a ball bank, and it was a half moon that had the ball in the center. And that indication would tell you right away whether you're skidding or slipping. And that's how we learned a lot to fly. We would, ourselves, we had that in the Jenny, and when we're making turns, we'd kind of check ourselves to see how we were doing. We found that people that were raised on a farm or run a tractor or run a bicycle or stuff like that was easier to teach to fly because he was able to coordinate hands and feet doing things on a farm where you cultivate and you use your feet to steer the cultivator. Motorcycles also was easier to fly because he had a sense of balance. Bicycles and so forth. You could buy a whole brand new Jenny for $200, but we couldn't afford $200, but the weekend we'd go and get a few nickels together. We were working extra time on weekends digging fox pens down in our neck of the woods where they were raising silver fox. But we get a little money and we go to Chicago, and down at the Ostergaard Aircraft, which was one of the oldest ones, he had surplus parts there stacked up, and we'd buy a few parts and we'd buy a fuselage one week and bring it home, and then we'd put it together out there on the farm. All we had was an engine, and the engine we found was down in Muskego down here in a lake. It was an ice boat engine, and it had to be one of the worst ones built. It was no double X2, which only had single ignition. They had dual ignition on one mag, and that was the most electronical ignition failure you ever saw because it didn't work out right. But the engine anyway produced it was an airplane engine, and that's what we were after. So we brought it home and made some posts in the ground, put some beams across it, and set it up with some water up there. And well, we had to learn how to time it. We learned how to set the valves and that thing, and we put some gas in it once and give it a pull, and man, the thing all of a sudden the smoke come out. It made a few turns, and We sat there for half an hour just laughing. Our first airplane engine made smoke and it turned over. That was our start, see. So we had the engine, so we go to Chicago. Then we bought the fuselage and brought that home and put it in the fuselage and got a radiator and made a radiator out of an automobile radiator. In those days, they were big, consuming. They would cool the engine. So we put that together, and every night after work at 7 o'clock in the evening, we'd go out there and start up the engine and chase the mosquitoes away from the farm. And then bought wings, and it was a clipped wing standard. It happened to be. It was, well, I think $15 or $20. You could buy a fuselage, and the wings were 10 or 15 bucks, but that was a lot of money in those days for parts, when you could buy a whole airplane for about $250, $300. But we thought the fun of putting one together and flying it would be the most challenging effect. So we accomplished it. We had got it flying, and it flew. But that would take you from now till next year to tell you about all the experience of that. After you get retired, you got to have something to keep yourself growing old, I guess. That's what you do. You just don't pass the time away doing something that's useful. I always said one thing: you never reach the ladder, the top of the ladder, except with your hands in your pocket. And the only way you can do that is build something with your hands. And a Crites pusher is something very interesting to build. Just a challenge, that's all. To build an airplane that'll fly. Everybody gets that same thing. You build something, you have a little feeling that you've accomplished something. Like Dave here, flying his P-51. That was a challenge. That's what it was. That's the reason we got out to fly and find out what a P-51 flew like. And the fact that it's a challenge, that's all. You accomplish something. If there wasn't any challenge, this word, I guess you'd just fade away. Fade away up in the sky.
Dale Crite, at 83, still flies his Crites pusher in the skies over Wisconsin.
You had all the apprehensions of what can happen, of course, when you're up there, whether this engine will keep on going. It could stop firing anytime, and then you are looking for a place to land. You work more flying a Crites pusher in the 10 minutes than you flying all day in a normal airplane, because the airplane has no stability whatsoever, because the air currents are rising faster than the airplane moves forward. They always said they flew the darn things when the dew is on the grass in the morning and the mosquitoes are out at night. So that eliminated these thermals that give you a bump. All of a sudden you feel like you're in an elevator. You're just sitting there floating along in the air with nothing under you, and you just feel like you're accomplishing something out of this world. It's what Crites said at one time: I'd fly for the mere sport of it if I wasn't in the business, because there's a fascination about flying that's difficult to explain and hard to resist. And that's just about what flying is.
In our finishing touch tonight, the conclusion of a kind of romance novel in Waukesha County. As Juliet Peters reports, the hero is Dale Crites. His lifelong love, the sky.
It was a part of their body. They were like birds.
A pilot's farewell today for 84-year-old Dale Crites, an aviation pioneer who, along with his twin brother, Dean, found lifelong adventure and happiness in the cockpit. The Crites brothers were bit by the flying bug after Charles Lindbergh soared across the Atlantic. And after that, they did just about everything but steal to support their love for flying.
At that time, we had no airport at all. We just flew out of every farmer's field that would let us fly out of.
Dean and Dale traveled all over the country looking for parts to build planes. Dale's pride and joy, this Crites pusher. They flew, their comrades say, by the seat of their pants.
A plane will tell you if it's being flown right. And a plane will tell you what the speed is when you're coming in for a landing. You listen to the wires, you listen to the sound of the wind, the engine.
There was days in December in 1931, Punta flew every day in the wintertime, all through, and the old water-cooled engines, and we had to warm them up to get them going.
It's that single-mindedness and devotion that kept Dale in this flying suit for decades, and others following his lead.
To me, he was my idol. He taught me many things, and I appreciate it. And I hope that someday, when I go, that someone behind me can have the respect for me that I had for Dale.
Juliet Peters, News Channel 4.
Local aviation history.